Hello viewers, and welcome to my first video of 2013, and where better to kick it off for this year than with Autosport International, the show that kicks off the year of motorsport. So I went along last week to find out what was being shown this year, and we kick off in this part looking at Formula 1. So the Autosport wouldn't be complete without the extensive display of Formula 1 cars, and 2013 is no different. So there they were, all on display, able to get up nice and close to them. Never can you get as close to a Formula 1 car, and look at the detail on that McLaren front wing. I always like seeing the curvature there, the wheel in the car, the size, the shape, really getting a feel for what the driver's actually working with. You know, it really does put it all into perspective for you. And of course, years ago, you couldn't do this. You know, quite often it was very hard getting close to Formula 1 cars. And I'm impressed with the complete state that they're actually in. Normally, you'd have bits and pieces removed to a point that it wasn't even the actual car. It was just a car painted like that. But here they had quite a lot of the bits and pieces on there. And it's nice to see again, the way the air flowed over these front wings. The front wings were extremely intricate on many of the cars, in little nudges and dips. You know, it's always impressive to see the mindset here, Adrian Newey's mindset, you know, his philosophy of the car and how it works. The steering wheel there from a different angle, nice detail on the shot. You can see there all those dials, the way it's tight at the rear, the type of rear wing that they're using, of course DRS now, and how tight the carbon fibre bodywork is around suspension, the flow of air over the car, and how it drags the air in towards the rear. And of course then we have the controversial exhausts, which are always being discussed, and you can see there the higher and lower air flows there as well. Very interesting. The holes of the floor, obviously they were filled in, that were shown early on in the year. Always a bit of controversy where Red Bull's concerned, pushing the envelope on the rules. The Ferrari, that's not, as you can see, it doesn't include the full bent nose edition that we were seeing in the season, so obviously it's not the exact Ferrari, but either way it was nice to see it on display there. And again, it's nice to get up close to these cars. Changes to Ferrari. It has to be said that there are lots of bits and pieces usually removed, especially from the underneath, so you can't see all the airflow, you can't see all the detail, but the cars vary in what they put here. Some of the cars in the lower ranked teams actually have their full car here. But again, it's nice to see the suspension set up, how it ties into the bodywork, how the airflow works, how tight the Ferrari is towards the rear there. Quite wide when you look at the floor. And a nice view over the bodywork. It doesn't have the platypus nose that we all know it has, which is a shame. We wanted to get that nose in there, viewers, but unfortunately it's one of those things that they didn't want to show. The Lotus actually was one of the most impressive, and you can see there the intricate detail on the front wing. I spent quite a bit of time around the Lotus. It appeared to be one of the most complete cars they had on display. Many elements to that front wing, many curvatures, lots of detail. Look at the rear wing. I mean, that's completely different to what we're seeing on the other F1 cars. You know, it's got that curvature to it, very detailed, intricate details all over the bodywork, lots of dents and dips and interesting ideas to airflow. Very complex design. Even through the center of the car there, you can see that dip. So it's certainly very impressive, and it shows how hard Lotus are actually trying to squeeze something out of the car. And let's just hope that they've found what they need to make it that little bit more competitive, especially in qualifying, because it was generally the qualifying pace of the car that let it down, whereas race pace tended to be very strong. And what with Pirelli constantly altering the tyres, it's something which teams are going to have to adapt to. The Sauber that was on display was looking very plain. That's obviously not all the details from the 2012 season, but again, nice to see the cars. The Virgin, Marussia, again quite a plain car, not a lot of remarkable details there. Caterham was a different story. They obviously were putting a lot of updates on the car. I mean, we saw at Silverstone that they were slightly disappointed by the performance, even once they included all the updates and weren't able to really make the difference. The Mercedes, however, again was very impressive. I mean, wonderful work has gone into this car. I mean, it's getting some beautiful details. It's just a shame it didn't have the pace that it really needed to get up there in the pack. They had pace early on in the season, it kind of fell away and reliability wasn't there for them. We're going to have to see if they can turn that around this year, if they've learned enough and that they can really make a more competitive car for the 2013 season, or if they're just going to be testing for 2014, because we're all expecting Mercedes to be strong because of the engine. It'll be interesting to see how Ferrari and Renault can compete on the engines. The cars have to have some competitive edge, otherwise it's not really going to be a very fair season in 2014. But from the new to the old, and it's nice to see cars such as Lotus, Nigel Mansell 1983, again nice to see the bodywork off so you can see inside. And I was looking at this at the time and thinking, imagine if you're an engineer like Adrian Newey and you was wondering what they were doing to their car at the time to make it fast, and now it's open, you can see where everything is, and that's how we did it. Obviously the technology is no good now, but it's certainly interesting from an engineering perspective to see how these cars were built, how they arranged the weight distribution, everything else. And beautiful cars. I mean, they really have that sort of Formula One feel to them. I have to admit, I'm a big fan of the early 90s cars. I mentioned the 91 Jordan before now. I love the look of it. And the way it's all packed together there, the exhaust, the bodywork goes around the engine. For the time, it shows how technically advanced these cars were and still are. They are works of art inside, and the mechanics really need to know their stuff. And there's so many parts that were hand built. It really is tremendous to see. To another car now from years ago, 92, Michael Schumacher, his Benetton at the time. I believe it was Martin Brundle who was his teammate at the time. There was that legendary race where he was trapped in fifth gear, I remember, and did a good job. Nice wide wheels. The wheels are considerably larger than they are on a modern F1 car, a lot wider as well, so there was a lot more in the way of mechanical grip for the drivers. But obviously it was a different type of driving back then, different type of output from the engine. Lewis Hamilton's karts on display from the late 90s there, 97. There it is on display, and that was on display along with a couple of others from other drivers, and we'll see those just in comparison of size there. You've got Ayrton Senna's, Jenson Button's, and of course Michael Schumacher's Formula One car. So it gives you an idea of the size of the different cars in comparison. And of course Ayrton Senna's Formula One car. That's his kart from 1979. Many of you will have seen that in the Ayrton Senna movie, his pure driving moment. And that for him was all you need in a race car: 4 wheels, an engine and a steering wheel. And that's what racing, if only racing was so simple. And now we have Senna's Lotus as well. It was on display. Nice to see. We've seen the videos, the films, and how these cars moved about. All the drivers were dealing with that kind of movement. They were all on the limit, and it's crazy to see the commitment that you needed to drive these cars. They really were absolutely on the limit. Fantastic machinery, and nice to get up so close to what is a legendary car. We're going to get some cockpit cam views, because many of you are using this car on project cars, and will be on Assetto Corsa eventually. These sort of cars, so it's nice to get in there and see the cockpit cams, the details, the engine placement and rear suspension. I always like to see how the engineers have worked around the space. Obviously I don't know if the diffusers are all as they were, but again, it was nice to see that. So that's a nice look at F1 on the show floor at Autosport International. So another great opportunity to see those cars, get up close to them, really see the details. It's interesting. There seems to be a lot more details on some of the cars this year than I've seen in previous years. Usually they remove quite a lot of the bodywork, and you could still see a lot of that detail remaining on the Lotus, for example, which was nice to see. And also the inner workings of some of the cars. It's always nice to get up close and see how the engineering is so tightly packed. It'd be nice to see that with a modern F1 car. I've been lucky enough to see that on a modern F1 car, and inside it really is a work of art, how they managed to pack all those innards in there and where they put their ballast and their batteries and everything else. It really is very, very impressive. And it's something that never ceases to amaze, really, how the technology moves on so quick, and how some things that seem remarkable remarkably obvious are sometimes forgotten and then included in later cars as well, which is fantastic. But that's part one of Autosport International. We've got more parts to come, including a look at the Sir Jackie Stewart collection as well, which is a fascinating display showing his years through motorsport and the evolution of those cars. We've got to look at some of the simulators. In particular, we've looked this year at the Motion Simulations TL1 and how that's been developing, something we've talked about in the past, but it's the first time we're actually showing it. Besides a roundup of the entire show as well. So more of that to come. That's it from me for now. As ever, more soon.